primary election coming up. No matter what side you're on, Republican, Democrat, whatever, you know, when the history of the United States is that one of our most important rights is to be able to vote. Well, okay, we vote, but then what about, does our vote count, right? And that's what we're really thinking of here. So we're going to have like analysis tonight by Brent as to, for us, particularly in San Francisco, what's going on with voting and, you know, the technical side.
But in the end, I persist. What you want is a system that is simply designed. Los Angeles County gave, on a sole source contract, a design contract to a group called IDEO for $15 million. IDEO for $15 million that basically created a machine that will not be in keeping with our better philosophy. What we suggest is off-the-shelf, inexpensive tablets and printers that are readily available and easily replaceable in conjunction with the open source, so that you don't have this vendor issue creeping back in to the equation. So it's an interesting problem because throwing money at it doesn't necessarily solve it. And again, that goes back to the concept of the simplicity and how sometimes these people in the design community want to outthink each other, and the end result is getting away from the premise. It should be understandable to the regular voter.
Physically, the machine would have a screen? You said something before.
Yes.
You would press someone's.
Yes.
So there's a screen.
Yes, on a tablet, and you would stand up and vote so that there would be privacy there, and look down and press your selections, and then your ballot would be dispensed with your selections intact. You would take a look at that ballot, make sure that it was what you intended, and then at that point, give it to the election official, and you would see it go through the scanner. And ideally, that precinct count would be good, because if you can do that previous to transportation, you're really ahead of the game from a security perspective, in our opinion.
If you could have handicapped vote from home on their own device, wouldn't the next logical step be everybody?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact. But again, there is a pushback to that smartphone voting concept, because people say, well, the Chinese will take over our elections and the hacks will come in. Well, one thing that's interesting is I wonder why those same scientists don't seem to be completely up in arms about Diebold and Dominion.
Absolutely.
Where are they now with that, with those systems? So yes, I think we're going to get there incrementally once some more security analysis comes in and people get their comfort levels. I believe that'll be true, and the disabilities community
They should be just as scared that China's listening to all our calls if they're going to be able to manipulate the vote, because they build these phones, you know?
And the fact is, I think there was a 60 Minutes piece just recently on that very point. The idea is there's a lot of nuance here in this equation and a lot of very heavy-duty interests spinning this information. So in our opinion, with the blockchain technology and the open source technology and the new abilities of some of this off-the-shelf inexpensive hardware, we're really able to do this at a much higher security level than we're doing it now. And again, that just comes back to the political will. For your knowledge, Tom Amiano here locally helped us pioneer this effort. Mark Leno, Phil Ting, David Chu, our current board, I think 11-0 at City Hall in San Francisco. I think we're there. Mayor Lee now has it in his ability to leave this money that has been granted, has been approved by Coit to come to us, this initial 300,000. We asked for 2.3 million. They gave us the larger number. They didn't give us the 2, they gave us the 3. 100,000. But
Minus a few zeros.
yeah, so somebody I just talked to said, and it was very funny, I won't say who it was, but very high up in the federal world, said, well, you should have asked for 2.9, then you would have got 900,000. But so the idea is, everybody's been briefed, I think everybody's on the same page. Now we just have to continue to shine the bright white spotlight so that those blocks that are suspicious can be removed. Please.
Brent, since you have been pushing at the highest level in the White House, we have a president who I think is, because he doesn't have to fight another battle for another 4 years and do anything else, he's trying to build a legacy for himself in a lot of ways and make some choices that will attach to his name. Have you gotten any feedback that this might be something that he might be able to roll out as part of his legacy, to educate us about the whole country about the problems with voting? I mean, it's been such a long time since, I know when we were first introduced to the Diebold machine and how it took 30 seconds to basically change what was inside the machine. I mean, that's like how many generations back in terms of our voting power. It's not on the agenda, it's not visible. Because you have made inroads to the White House, do you think it's important to try and reach him and say, this is a legacy piece?
Absolutely. And we're in his ear.
Yeah.
His sister, Maya, is very aware. And if you look at our webpage, you'll see a PSA that was narrated by Peter Coyote.
Yeah.
And that was actually made by Change the World Productions, which is the president's go-to film crew. So we've seen signs that he likes it, but in trying to reach out to him recently, I haven't had the pleasure of speaking with him directly. He did have his secretary call me to tell me he didn't have time, which I thought was a nod in itself.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
thought it was fun that the phone rang with his secretary saying, you know, will you quit pestering the president? He doesn't have time right now. He's in the middle of speaking to, you know, Putin or something. And I, you know, hey, okay. But I think he's aware. He did appoint another one of our board members from Cavo to be the executive director for the Elections Assistance Commission at the federal level, a fellow by the name of Brian Newby. And he did appoint the fellow that put those Diebold videos on YouTube, Ed Felton, as the head of this within the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So we're taking those as signs he's aware. Unfortunately, he put together the Presidential Election Commission, who they were tasked with putting together information regarding problems and solutions. They did a pretty good job. They mentioned a lot of the problems,
Right.
and they alluded to the technology software problems. The committee itself, the commission, was staffed by Bob Bauer and others, partisan people from Perkins Coie and Jones Day, big law firms that even have Microsoft as a client. So it goes up that high.
Okay.
And when we went to put the open source information into the report, it was acknowledged as received, but it was omitted from the report. And that was a fellow by the name of Nate Pursley, who is another Stanford professor same as David Dill,
Yeah.
the Stanford professor that took the $7.5 million for what was called the Accurate Grant that was supposed to provide solution to this in 2005. So not to disparage Stanford in particular, but we have a group of professors that seem to come out of Stanford that maybe are themselves a little cozy with the intellectual property community in that they share a geographic
We need
there.
to lean more towards Larry Lessig.
Yes, Larry
Yeah.
is heightenedly familiar
Yeah.
with this issue, as we have met with him personally, and I think he's a good Joe on
Yeah,
this issue,
Yeah.
and so he's a little different. But I was really upset that open source didn't make its way into the Presidential Election Commission report, because that was unconscionable that it was omitted, and I'm still
Okay,
have an issue there.
yeah, all right, thanks.
I want to ask you about the other machine in use in San Francisco, the one that's used almost exclusively for handicapped voters. I would assume it has the same issue of proprietary software, but in terms of the procedure, does this meet your do you know the machine?
Yes,
Right. This produces a ballot, a paper ballot that shows all of your choices. Is this an example of, I mean, it's no doubt more, you're talking about doing with tablets, it's no doubt more complicated and I'm sure much more expensive. But it is there largely for handicap access. But does it meet the criterion of clarity in terms of the voter knowing what has been recorded?
well, I'm not familiar because I haven't used it myself in San Francisco, and for full disclosure, I live in San Mateo County, and there we have Hart InterCivic systems, which are different. Now, I know the Connect the Dot system that is used here, the particular disabilities components attached to that machine, maybe John knows more, but it has, I'm assuming, sip and puff capability.
Oh, okay, so, so you don't know the system, I can't think of the name of it.
Yes, yes,
It produces
A receipt.
A receipt.
an actual receipt, the complete list of your votes.
right, and that is called a VVPAT, a voter verifiable paper audit trail.
Right.
That particular system was created when I mentioned earlier the Accurate grant of $7.5 million that was absorbed by David Dill and Avi Rubin. They now are what's called verified voting, a good governance group. Actually, their president was the one I mentioned where there was silence as to the senator's question. That's the same group, so this is sort of a common thread. That particular system, the voter verified paper audit trail, that's what's known as a cash register tape under glass. The problem with that system is it's been shown that the tabulation process that occurs on that receipt is not necessarily what's being tabulated by the internal software. Now, there is a reconciliation that occurs, but unfortunately it's been shown a wise guy, a bad Apple actor, could manipulate that so that it feigned reconciliation, but the reality is the security element was lost. So if that helps you to answer your question, just for your knowledge, that was originally conceptualized by a woman by the name of Dr. Rebecca Mercury. She unfortunately was thrown out of that Accurate working group to her great protest, and really feels bad that her initial design was bastardized, and that's what eventuated from her efforts was that cash register under glass. If you notice, the window is difficult and tends to fog, and it's tough for the voter to see that particular cash register tape, and the fact that someone could bring in an outside cash register tape and stick it in there and then make for reconciliation is really problematic. So this reverts back to what Ed Felton showed with his insertion of a device that could manipulate the counting process. So the short answer is no, that is not something, although the sip and puff, if they have that, I'm sure they do, and the mechanism for people suffering sight issues, this probably is close to what Dr. Gilbert has utilized with his open source system, although I'm assuming he upgraded some of their disabilities components naturally because the system is fairly outdated now, the edge. So I think there's been
Right,
advancements.
I couldn't
Yeah.
think of it.
Are you somehow involved in elections or something?
Yes.
Okay, and what's your,
My name's John Ma. I'm a surgeon in San Francisco. I was the first person asked for a recount of a statewide ballot measure in District, California. Your history, and I have done recounts in the Registrar's Office, the Secretary of State's office, overseen recounts in 4 different county offices, and I've been advising every recount in the state of California ever since at the statewide level.
so statewide?
Yeah, so I know a lot about, been following Brent's work. I'm glad to see that, there are just so many problems.
Well-
San Mateo's moving to an absentee ballot only system, and, I think your work, if it can be integrated, the Secretary of State has this vision for the future where every voter, whether you vote in precinct or by absentee, can get a paper trail, to know that your ballot was counted and how it's processed, and hopefully, I don't think it's quite at the point where you can actually prove that your votes casted were actually what were recorded, when and when they're counted. I mean, that's even taking your great work and moving it another level up, and then I agree, I was finished with saying, to solve this at a federal level. I mean, the irony here is that the 58 counties like their own autonomous fiefdom, and the Secretary of State, believe it or not, is almost powerless, over the 58 registrars. But then you go to the federal level, and, I love your question about the president. You would have hoped that he could have done something before this November election, but we're already seeing with the lawsuit by Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, the DNC against Arizona, I think, not to take anything away from your work, but the real problem is people who can't get to vote. I mean, you're solving the problem. You can actually get into a precinct, be given a piece of paper and mark it. But what we're seeing is a greater problem across the country is people being disenfranchised. So I'm not trying to take it
No,
away.
and I appreciate your candidate feels outmatched by the system itself, that, they're not experts on this, and there's money issues by having to contest an election. So ideally, we focus on what I term the first count. If you can get a tight, secure first count, you're winning the game of security for an election. If you are relying on an audit to provide you the road to security, you're already down a dark path. And on a worldwide basis, once word leaks out that there is contestation regarding the election, people burn down their villages in that moment because the insinuation and innuendo of corruption is heavy. That how come they can't get a proper vote count? What's going on? And the passage of time has another effect, because if you are a wise guy, having ballots around, it's a very fine line. You don't want to count them so quickly that the quickness of the count to pander to the media's proclivity toward announcement is one thing to avoid. You want to take your time and do it properly, measure twice, cut once, get a proper tight vote count. But also, you don't want to take so much time that wise guys can figure out about bringing in outside ballots that weren't really voted, and that can occur currently because of the lax security surrounding the system. With our system, just so you know, there's a random generated number attached to each ballot within the barcode. Some people object to the barcode as if that might be an invasion of privacy, or be tantamount to lack of privacy. But the fact is, with that barcode is another security level. to prohibit against outside ballots coming into the equation that could be counted inappropriately. And so that's just something to know.
Well, all I can say is, after listening to this, you two, well, you're fighting one battle, and have been fighting a lot of battles. Do you feel successful?
We got a long way to go.
And you, from your explanation, I mean, there is so, even if you brought in the upfront count, there seems to be so much incentive on all types of levels to find a way around it anyhow. It sounds, really, after hearing this, great work, and I think, I like to think of myself sometimes as fighting for what I think is right and just, but it just sounds like totally insurmountable.
No, don't be
What can we
discouraged.
do? I think that's the.
Don't be discouraged.
No,
The
what-
technology, let me tell you, even with bad eggs out there, the technology with our system, very difficult to game.
But the incentive, if it can't be with the technology,
Yes,
there's so much incentive to undermine stuff.
yes.
They will find another way. If they can't do it any longer on your end, then they'll make sure they do it on this end.
What end would you say that is? You mean with the front end disenfranchisement?
Sure.
Well,
all kinds of
we can cure that by having enough places to vote. So, you know,
Well,
we can do that simply.
there's all types of ways of disenfranchising
Right.
people. Actually, it doesn't
There-
just have to do with placement and stuff. It is kind of keeping people
From voting,
just from voting.
that's right.
From
Well, you see an effort right now going the other way in San Francisco to let 16-year-olds vote. So that will add. I will tell you.
As long as it works for those in power.
Okay.
Once they find something isn't working for them, they will find some
Okay.
other way, because just what you have described that you faced from, I don't know how much power the president does have about election. It seems to me the federal election stops with the president because the states control things under that. And I don't know how much power they have to even tell the state how to run. They certainly might have some power over who can vote if the state's going to be able to think. But other than that, they have no power. And then right down the line, you need someone like ISA, and then nice people who have some honesty. But unfortunately, as we see even in this election, there is so much, even, I don't know how many, I'm a Bernie supporter, because I'm interested in honesty. They've been hacking Bernie sites and putting pornography on there,
Yes.
so that Facebook will close them down.
Right.
There is always, and this is Hillary's people supposedly.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know, but
the fact is, you
they
don't.
did. There's our reports that
Trump's already calling every Democrat.
she hired
Yeah.
some of her PACs hired people to do this, but nonetheless, there's always such an incentive to undermine and to find a way for whatever money or
Yes.
power that I applaud your work. I don't want to say that, but again, it seems to me we're
Well, it's
Don Quixote.
an endless battle, and it's been going on since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
So you just continue to fight, and you don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You continue to fight,
Well,
and
I know.
it's
But-
cumulative.
You know, it's old, Tammany Hall,
Yes.
I'm
Boss
saying
tweet.
it wrong, it's right.
Boss tweet, yes.
Right, boss
But-
tweet,
but-
vote often and,
But
you know.
unfortunately, in my opinion, this is just my opinion too, and I don't want to say don't do this. I wouldn't be out there working for
Of
Bernie
course.
if I thought it was
Yeah.
totally stupid, but it just kind of gives me the idea that there is more incentive to undermine than there is on the majority of people to participate. You know what I mean? I mean, if everyone, I mean, the reason why the group is so small today, I try to get some volunteers for this weekend, everyone's away. So don't,
Yes.
you know, we're interested. But this room should be, you should have to have AT&T Park to come here.
Well,
you know what I mean?
and it is ebb and flow with the size of the crowds that we have. This crowd is a fine crowd, and I'm appreciative to be here because I think it allows this nice little roundtable discussion to occur. I will say that, as I said to the people at Google, when we met with Google, if you want real participation, that will happen when we get to the point of smartphone voting. If you want to see the masses enfranchised, that will solve the issues of small town disenfranchisement, because,
Is the government going to supply everyone with a smartphone?
well, I think President Obama has made mention in particular because he said we can order a pizza easier than we can vote. So we know that he knows, and again, it's a work in progress. But to take it back, initially what we know we want to do is get the corporations out of the chain of custody of the vote counting.
Yeah.
That's simple, and that's our first step. Once we do that, then we can address what John was talking about. Enfranchisement issues are always going to be there. There's always going to be bad people trying to muss up the election.
But it seems to be now, and I don't know any way of comparing it, but, there is no price anymore for a politician or anyone to lie, even though they have videotape. There's no price. And when we're in that, we're Don Quixote. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, and it's not that I wouldn't be active if I would totally give
Well,
up.
this is why we occupy.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
So this is why
There you are.
you still want to vote on the best systems available. Hey, then occupy.
There you go,
so-
Brent.
But they
There
are,
you go.
but they
Yeah.
are totally, I mean, the Occupy movement, and, whatever you want to say, Bernie Bros, everything is thrown at, by the very people who are doing the dirty work and who get away with it. You see, the people, unfortunately, it's always more difficult to be honest, and you pay a higher price when you're honest. So all the incentives out there, and just in the political realm today, in every realm, I've worked in a couple different realms, but there is no longer, except if you do something sexual, you'll get things thrown at you. Other than that, you can rip everybody off, you can lie, you can do whatever you want, and I feel there's no price that is paid, and the public is at fault because they go along with it, and the manipulation is so strong. I don't want to say give up, but after listening,
Well, even if you told me to, I wouldn't, so that's good.
I know,
But
the thing is
the
so overwhelming.
arc of history bends toward justice.
Oh, wow.
And that's what we're hoping. And
Okay,
so,
it's a hope.
I think it's a hope, but I think it's up to us to continue the battle.